Journaling is one of those things that most people know is good for you, but how often do we actually do it? I will honestly say that alongside meditation, my journaling practice has been the single most important transformative thing in my life. I've been journaling nearly every day for the past 25 years, and this is just some of the journals that have accumulated over the years. And there are boxes more spread out in America, in China when I lived there, and in England where I live now. So what are the benefits of this type of deep journaling practice? And how do we go about doing it? Well, I think that the most common challenge we face in approaching journaling practice is overthinking it. And sometimes the easiest, most straightforward method is the most profound. And that's the method that I want to introduce you to today. A method that is really going to transform not only how you approach your journaling and think of your journaling, but also how you approach your life and think of your life. It's the process that I've used for 25 years ago. So let me take you back 25 years ago. I was 16 years old. And I was in a bookshop and I came across Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. Some of you, I'm sure, will have heard about it before. Some of you maybe have even read it. Julia Cameron in that book introduced the concept of morning pages. 3 pages of stream of consciousness, handwritten writing every morning. And in the nearly 25 years that I've been doing this, the practice has really deepened for me. And I've begun to realize why it is so profound and transformative. Julia Cameron speaks quite a lot about it, of course, in her book, but what I have learned more recently through my own research into non-dual philosophy and philosophy of mind is that the morning pages are really rooted in this existentialist idea of confronting the self, and in so many ways resonate with psychotherapeutic practices that have risen to prominence throughout the 20th century. I'm going to talk about that and a lot more as well. But let me first begin with just a brief summary of what the morning pages are, in case you've never heard of them before. So the basic guidelines are, and these are given to us by Julia Cameron in 1992's book, The Artist's Way, write 3 pages longhand first thing in the morning, and let that writing flow without judgment or editing. So why do these rules matter? And if you're already thinking, well, can I type it or does it have to be 3 pages? Let me explain why these rules are so powerful and why I've learned over the years to really stick to them. First of all, I am a digital native. I love my devices, my computer, my tablets and everything. But for morning pages, the pen really is king because writing by hand slows the mind and fosters a deeper sense of reflection. I can type much more quickly than I can write by hand. And when I'm writing work emails, that's great. I want to get those work emails done to a high quality and sent off as quickly as I can. But my inner journey is not a work email. My inner journey is something that I want to afford the time, care, and attention that it deserves. So writing by hand slows us down, and it begins to tap into that liminal state between asleep and awake. That's why we do it first thing in the morning. That's why it's called morning pages. This is sometimes called hypnagogia, that movement between wakefulness and sleep, and we get that sort of dreamy, otherworldly quality. And I found that some of my most profound and transformative experiences with journaling have been when I got up and went straight to the page. Before I did yoga, before I even made a cup of coffee, before I sometimes even got out of bed. Approaching this practice with curiosity rather than expectation is what's most important though, because that stack of journals, that's just a small sampling of the countless journals that I filled over 2.5 decades. And it's not that every day is profound and transformative, but for me, it's the practice of my morning pages that's what matters. Morning pages really serve us as a tool, perhaps most importantly, for emotional healing. Because with our stream of consciousness writing, it enables us to get out that unfiltered expression and creating a safe space for us to speak about those emotions that maybe we aren't speaking about elsewhere. It's similar to that process of catharsis in old school psychoanalysis, that letting go of hidden feelings and allowing them to emerge without judgment. Because a key premise of the morning pages is that we approach them without judgment. And over time, we begin to notice patterns and themes emerging in these unfiltered expressions. Recurring thoughts really become visible to us, providing us insights into the habits of how we think. As we observe day after day, morning after morning, page after page, our thoughts spilling out in ink in front of us, we begin to see the inner workings of the mind. We begin to notice what comes up regularly, that colleague whose conversations we've read about, that particular task or responsibility that fills us with dread. These things might not be conscious parts of our waking awareness, but as we see them flowing onto the page day after day, we begin to truly recognize the hold that they have on us. And somehow magically, just by paying them attention, we seem to take some of that heat out of them. We seem to take some of that fire and energy away from them. Writing about what's ugly or uncomfortable and doing it as often as we need to leads to a greater sense of acceptance, leads to a greater sense of integration with who we are. Morning pages also help us to bypass the voice of the inner critic. And I really believe that the inner critic is becoming an even more pressing challenge in our modern world. As our world speeds up, as we have increasing amounts of information surrounding us at all times, as we are able to instantaneously see what people all around the world are doing and how they're doing it better than us, that voice of the inner critic is going to become even more pronounced. Morning pages begin to tame that voice of the inner critic. This is what Julia Cameron refers to as creative recovery, as we reconnect to those forgotten or suppressed creative impulses by letting the voice of the inner critic run out on the page until it runs out of steam, or as we mature into the practice, until we get bored of the voice of the inner critic. If we had a friend or a colleague who spoke to us in the same way as our inner critic did, what would we do? Well, we certainly wouldn't put up with someone who's constantly belittling us and berating us and challenging and confronting us. We would put a stop to that. But more subtly, and this is something that people forget a lot, would we put up with someone who is as boring and as repetitive as our inner critic? Because all our inner critic talks about is us not being good enough. And that's the message that it says in countless ways throughout the day. If we had a friend or colleague who said the same thing over and over and over again, would we want to spend time with them? Probably not. We'd probably begin to distance ourselves from them. And this is what we begin to see in our morning pages. We begin to see how the voice of the inner critic, even though in the moment can feel powerful and charged, when we see it just moaning on the page day after day, we realize how basic, how repetitive, and how fundamentally unnecessary that is. Morning pages enable us to nurture adaptability, openness, and problem solving in really, really powerful ways. They also can serve as really useful daily check-ins. So I am, like many of you, someone whose mind works really quickly, always jumping to the next task, what I need to do today or tomorrow or a week from now. And sometimes my morning pages just begin with me saying, this afternoon I need to do this, that, and that. And tomorrow I need to go shopping. And Friday I need to meet up with friends. Sometimes just that daily check-in and just getting it out clears the space. It clears the decks for the creativity and productivity that's going to come afterwards. It also leads to this really interesting state of detachment and perspective gaining as we're able to look at our thoughts from a different perspective. Rather than having to inhabit our thoughts, which we know our thoughts are not true most of the time, And our emotions are certainly not true most of the time. They feel true. They encourage the organism to behave certain behaviors in order to stay alive. But as we begin to see these observed on the page, we begin to realize that our thoughts are a story that we create. And sometimes that story is profoundly limiting. And that story is one filled with self-reproach. Sometimes that story is filled with an unforgiving attitude toward ourselves. It's not about changing that story. It's not about writing the life that we would rather live, but instead, it's about writing the life that we are living until it changes for us. This isn't something that happens in one day. It isn't something that happens in 1 week. It is something that happens over months and years of a practice of morning pages. There's some challenges that we can encounter that can prevent us from doing that. Sometimes people begin all gung-ho in week 1 and they do a week or 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks or 4, but then the practice fades away. Because there can be a subconscious resistance to the process. And Cameron writes a lot about this, both in The Artist's Way and her later works. Psychologically, this resistance can really signal that valuable material is about to emerge. Our ego is trying to put up barriers and blocks around that part of us that is most vulnerable, that wants to avoid detection. So when we feel most resistant to the practice, that's usually a cue to us that some valuable, important, transformative stuff is beginning to emerge. So rather than stopping morning pages when we feel resistance, write about that resistance to move through it. That resistance is part of the process. And by the way, I'll pop a link in the comments below to my online 30-day integrative meditation course, which introduces a bunch of ways to journal and how to cultivate this practice alongside a meditation practice. So you might find that really useful or something to share with someone that you care about. The second challenge that we can encounter as we develop our journaling practice is our fear of confronting emotion. This is a really, really big one. Even those of us who say that we're really in touch with our emotions, we feel able to discuss the highs and the lows of our life. I promise you, there will be parts of your shadow that you are reluctant to share, even in the privacy of your morning pages. Acknowledging fear as part of the process is so important. And this is why our morning pages always remain completely private and entirely judgment-free. You don't even have to reread your morning pages for them to be beneficial. For years, I didn't reread my morning pages, and only now, once I finish a journal, do I go back and read from the beginning to observe how my life unfolded over that period of time. But that's not where the transformation happens. The transformation happens in showing up day after day and writing about where you are in that day. That's all that matters. And the final big challenge that many people face, and this is one that I faced early on in my morning pages practice, is overcoming perfectionism. We want our morning pages to be perfect. We want our morning pages to read like Virginia Woolf's diary. This is not what morning pages are. Morning pages are messy. Morning pages are unclear. Morning pages jump from point to point to point. The goal is not polished prose, but authentic expression. And for those of you like me who are writers, this will seem particularly difficult. You think of morning pages as the way to hone and perfect your craft. What I've found, curiously, is that practice of messy, unfiltered writing in the morning is what enables me to show up at the page of my professional writing later in the afternoon. These two forms of writing work together in really, really profound ways. And if you've not read Julia Cameron's books, The Artist's Way, or many of the sequels that come after, definitely pick some of them up. Morning pages are a ritual, a transformative ritual, something that can lead you into your day in really, really profound and enriching ways. And over time, can lead to significant transformation in your life, and because you're transformation in the lives of those around you. And I'm sure that you have those 2 or 3 friends who you've spoken to about journaling before, or who are interested in spirituality or philosophy or self-development. So share this video with them, because being able to commit to a practice of morning pages with others is so powerful. It's not that you share your pages with them, but you're able to check in on the process, and you're able to begin your journey together and to carry on your journey together. Also, be sure to like and subscribe, because this channel is filled with lots of different topics about ways to continue to grow and enhance your spiritual presence and your awareness of the world, how to develop a greater sense of integrity, develop a greater sense of consistency, and develop a greater sense of wholeness and completeness in your own life. Until next time, happy journaling and enjoy the transformative process.